The name Ivan the Terrible strikes fear and intrigue into the hearts of those who hear it. This notorious figure, the first Tsar of Russia, is remembered not just for his reign but for his ruthless approach to power. But what made Ivan become the tyrant that history remembers? What events shaped his path toward brutality? Born into a turbulent time, Ivan faced countless challenges in his early years. The death of his father left him vulnerable, and he witnessed the fierce battles for power among the nobility. These experiences fueled his desire for control and set the stage for the violence that would define his rule. As a young boy, he was subjected to neglect and cruelty, which only hardened his heart and fueled a thirst for vengeance. Ivan's reign began with promise and reform, but the shadow of his past loomed large. The turning point came when his beloved wife died, shattering his already fragile psyche. His grief morphed into paranoia, leading him to see enemies everywhere. He unleashed a wave of terror, executing those he suspected of betrayal and employing brutal tactics against his foes. Why did this young prince turn into a tyrant? What was it about his upbringing and the political chaos around him that drove him to such extremes? Understanding his early life is crucial to grasping the reasons behind his transformation into one of history's most feared rulers. Prepare to uncover the truth behind Ivan the Terrible, a man whose name is forever etched in infamy. Early life. Ivan IV Vasilyevic, commonly known as Ivan the Terrible, was born on August 25, 1530. He was the first son of Vasily III and his second wife, Elena Glinskaya. Ivan's family had royal ties. His grandmother, Sophia Paleologina, was a princess from the Eastern Roman Empire. She was the daughter of Thomas Palaiologos, who was the younger brother of the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos. Elena Glinskaya also came from a noble background, as her mother was a Serbian princess. And her father's family, the Glinsky clan, had connections to both Orthodox Hungarian nobles and the Mongol ruler Mamai. Ivan received his name in honor of Saint John the Baptist. As his birth date fell close to the day of the saint's beheading, celebrated on August 29th. Some historical texts refer to him using the names Titus and Smaragd, reflecting a tradition among the Rurikids of having multiple names. He was baptized in the Trinity Lavra of Saint Sergius by Abbot Joseph. Two elders from the Joseph-Volokholamsk monastery, the monk Kashan Bosoi and Hegumen Daniel, were chosen as his godfathers. According to tradition, a church called the Church of the Ascension was built in Kolomenskoye to celebrate his birth. When Ivan was just 3 years old, his father passed away due to complications from an abscess and leg inflammation that led to blood poisoning. After his father's death, Ivan became the Grand Prince of Moscow at a very young age, as his father had requested. His mother, Elena Glinskaya, served as regent but died when Ivan was 8, which many believe was due to poisoning. After her death, various noble families, known as boyars, fought for control over the young ruler. Ivan and his younger brother, Yuri, often felt neglected by these powerful families. In a letter to a noble named Andrei Kurbsky, Ivan expressed the hardships he faced, saying they were raised poorly, lacking proper clothing and food. On January 16, 1547, at the age of 16, Ivan was crowned at the Cathedral of the Dormition in the Moscow Kremlin. During the ceremony, the Metropolitan placed royal symbols on Ivan: the cross of the life-giving tree, a ceremonial robe called barmaz, and the cap of monomac. He was anointed with myrrh, and the Metropolitan blessed him. With this crowning, Ivan became the first Russian monarch to hold the title of Tsar of all Russia, following the example set by his grandfather, Ivan III. Before Ivan IV, rulers were known as Grand Princes. But Ivan III had already started using the title Tsar in correspondence with other monarchs. 2 weeks after his coronation, Ivan married his first wife, Anastasia Romanovna, from the Romanov family, who became the first Russian Tsaritsa. By taking on the title of Tsar, Ivan sent a clear message to both his subjects and the world. He was the supreme ruler of Russia, and his authority was absolute. According to historian Janet Martin, this new title symbolized powers similar to those held by the Byzantine emperors and Tatar Khans, which raised Ivan's position in the eyes of his people. This new title did not just strengthen his claim to the throne, it also connected his power to religion. Ivan was seen as a divine ruler chosen to carry out God's will. Church texts referred to Old Testament kings as tsars, and even called Christ the heavenly Tsar. This concept of divine leadership became a tradition passed down through generations, benefiting later rulers who followed Ivan's example. Like other monarchs in Europe, the first Russian Tsars created mythological family trees that linked them to ancient civilizations. They traced their ancestry back to Rurik, the first prince of Novgorod. There was even a claim that Rurik was a relative of Augustus, the famous Roman emperor. Ivan IV often highlighted this connection, emphasizing that he was not just of Rus, but had German lineage through Rurik. These stories served to elevate Ivan's status in the eyes of his subjects and other European leaders, who also crafted similar mythical histories for themselves. Domestic policy. During the early years of Ivan IV's reign, he focused on bringing peace and making important changes in Russia. Despite the challenges posed by the Great Fire of 1547, he worked on several reforms aimed at modernizing the country. One of his major achievements was revising the law code, leading to the creation of the Sudebnik of 1550. This new law code helped to organize the legal system and address various issues. Ivan also established a standing army called the Streltsy, which helped maintain order and protect the state. He created the Zemsky Sobor, the first parliament in Russia, which brought together representatives from different social classes to discuss important matters. Additionally, he formed the Chosen Council, a group of noble advisors who assisted him in making decisions. The Church's role in society was strengthened during Ivan's reign through the Council of the 100 Chapters, or Stoglovy Synod. This council aimed to standardize religious practices and rules throughout Russia, ensuring that everyone followed the same guidelines. Ivan also introduced local self-government in rural areas, especially in northeastern Russia, allowing communities to have more control over their local affairs. In 1553, Ivan faced a serious illness that many believed would be fatal. While he was ill, he requested the boyars, the noble class, to pledge their loyalty to his eldest son, who was just a baby at that time. However, many boyars hesitated to do so, thinking Ivan would not survive. This refusal angered him and deepened his distrust of the boyars, leading to violent actions against them, including the assassination of Metropolitan Philip and Prince Alexander Gorbaty-Shuisky. In the same year, Ivan initiated the establishment of the Moscow Print Yard, bringing the printing press to Russia. This was a significant development because it allowed the production of religious books in the Russian language during the 1550s and 1560s. However, this new technology caused resentment among traditional scribes, resulting in an arson attack that destroyed the print yard. The first Russian printers, Ivan Fedorov and Pyotr Mstislavets, had to escape to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Despite this setback, printing resumed in 1568 under the leadership of Andronik Timofeyevich Neveza and his son Ivan. To commemorate the capture of Kazan, Ivan commissioned the construction of St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow. There is a popular legend that he was so awed by the beauty of the cathedral that he had the architect, Postnik Yakovlev, blinded to prevent him from creating anything as beautiful again. However, in reality, Yakovlev continued to work for Ivan and designed more churches, including the chapel over St. Basil's grave, which was added to the cathedral in 1588, long after Ivan's death. While different architects were involved, it is believed that Yakovlev was the main designer. During this time, Ivan also introduced the first laws that limited the movement of peasants, a move that eventually contributed to the establishment of serfdom in Russia, which would be formally enacted under Tsar Boris Godunov in 1597. However, as Ivan's reign continued, Russia faced significant challenges. Poor harvests, the harsh impact of the Oprichnina, Ivan's political policy, ongoing Tatar raids, extended warfare, and overpopulation led to a severe social and economic crisis in the later years of his rule. These factors combined created hardships for the people and posed significant challenges for Ivan as he tried to maintain control over the country. Oprichnina. The 1560s were a difficult time for Russia, leading to major changes in Ivan IV's policies. The country faced numerous challenges, including droughts and famines that caused widespread suffering. Additionally, Russia was involved in unsuccessful wars against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and suffered invasions from the Tatars. The country also faced blockades on its sea trade by the Swedes, Poles, and members of the Hanseatic League. In 1560, Ivan's first wife, Anastasia Romanovna, died under suspicious circumstances, with many believing she was poisoned. Her death was a personal tragedy for Ivan, and it profoundly affected him, likely impacting his mental state and personality. At this time, one of Ivan's advisors, Prince Andrei Kurbsky, betrayed him by defecting to the Lithuanians. Kurbsky took command of the Lithuanian troops and caused destruction in the Russian region of Veliky Luki. This betrayal intensified Ivan's already growing distrust of the nobility. On December 3, 1564, Ivan left Moscow and went to Alexandrova Sloboda. There, he sent 2 letters announcing his abdication, citing corruption and treason among the aristocracy and the clergy. The boyar court struggled to govern without him and feared the anger of the citizens in Moscow. To resolve the crisis, a boyar envoy was sent to plead with Ivan to return to the throne. Ivan agreed to come back, but only if he was granted absolute power. He insisted on having the authority to condemn and execute traitors and to seize their estates without interference from the boyar council or the church. This led to the creation of the Oprichnina, a new political system that gave Ivan significant control. Alexandrova Sloboda became a territory where Ivan held exclusive power. Primarily located in the area of the former Novgorod Republic in the north. While the boyar council continued to rule over the Zemshchina, the part of the state not under Ivan's control, he created a personal guard known as the Oprichniki. This group initially consisted of about 1,000 men and was led by Malyuta Skuratov. One notable member of the Oprichniki was the German adventurer Heinrich von Staden. The Oprichniki received social and economic privileges and owed their loyalty directly to Ivan, rather than to local leaders or family ties. The first wave of persecutions primarily targeted the princely families of Russia, especially those from Suzdal, who were influential in society. Ivan executed, exiled, or forced many prominent boyars into religious life on questionable charges of conspiracy. Among those who suffered were Metropolitan Philip and the notable warlord Alexander Gorbaty-Shuisky. In 1566, Ivan expanded the Oprichnina to cover 8 central districts, leading to the expulsion of most nobles from their positions. Out of 12,000 nobles, only 570 became Oprichniki, while the others were removed from power. Under this new system, the Oprichniki were granted large estates but were not held responsible for their actions, unlike previous landlords. This resulted in widespread oppression. The Oprichniki took nearly all the wealth from the peasants, forcing them to pay significantly higher taxes. Reports indicated that peasants were required to pay in 1 year as much as they had previously paid in 10 years. This oppression led to an increase in the number of peasants fleeing, which ultimately reduced agricultural production. As a result, grain prices soared, increasing tenfold. Later in his life, Ivan expressed regret over the harsh measures he took and the impact of the Oprichnina, especially following the death of his son. He began compiling lists of the Christian victims who had been killed under his orders and asked monasteries to pray for each of them. This reflection showed his remorse for the suffering caused during this dark chapter of his reign. Sack of Novgorod. The conditions during the Oprichnina worsened significantly due to an epidemic that struck in 1570. This plague claimed the lives of about 10,000 people in Novgorod and caused the deaths of 600 to 1,000 individuals daily in Moscow. Amid the bleak circumstances of the epidemic, a famine, and the ongoing Livonian War, Ivan IV became increasingly suspicious that the noblemen in Novgorod, a wealthy city, were planning to defect and submit to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. A citizen of Novgorod named Petrovolonets alerted Ivan about this alleged conspiracy. which many modern historians believe was unfounded. In 1570, Ivan ordered the Oprichniki to raid Novgorod. During this attack, the Oprichniki burned and looted the city and its surrounding villages, leading to Novgorod never regaining its former importance. The exact number of casualties from this massacre varies widely among different historical sources. The First Pskov Chronicle estimates that around 60,000 people may have died during this period. According to the Third Novgorod Chronicle, the massacre lasted for 5 weeks and involved horrific acts against men, women, and children. Many victims were tied to sleighs and forced into the freezing waters of the Fokhov River based on Ivan's unproven accusations of treason. The Oprichniki also tortured the inhabitants and killed thousands in a violent rampage. The archbishop was also hunted down and killed. Daily death tolls were shocking, with estimates of 500 to 600 people killed each day, some by drowning. However, the official records stated that about 1,500 of Novgorod's notable citizens, the nobility, were killed, along with a similar number of ordinary citizens. Modern researchers suggest that the actual number of victims could range from 2,000 to 3,000 because, after the famines and epidemics of the 1560s, Novgorod's population likely did not exceed 10,000 to 20,000. Many survivors of the massacre were forcibly removed from the city. The Oprichnina did not last long after the sack of Novgorod. During the Russo-Crimean War of 1571–72, the Oprichniki struggled to perform effectively against a well-organized army. In 1572, Ivan decided to abolish the Oprichnina and disband the Oprichniki. In September or October of 1575, Ivan appointed Simeon Bekbilatovich, a Tatar statesman, as the new Grand Prince of all Russia. Simeon served as a figurehead leader for about a year. According to the English envoy Giles Fletcher the Elder, Simeon acted according to Ivan's instructions to seize all the lands owned by monasteries, while Ivan pretended to disagree with this decision. When Ivan resumed the throne in September 1576, he returned some of the confiscated land but kept most of it for himself. Foreign policy. In 1547, Hans Schlitt, an agent of Ivan IV, attempted to recruit craftsmen from Germany to work in Russia. Unfortunately, all the craftsmen were arrested in Lubeck due to pressure from Poland and Livonia. As a result, the German merchant companies ignored a new port that Ivan had built on the river Narva in 1550. They continued to ship goods to the Baltic ports owned by Livonia, leaving Russia isolated from sea trade. During this time, Ivan sought to strengthen ties with England. The relationship between Russia and England began in 1551 with the formation of the Muscovy Company by Richard Chancellor, Sebastian Cabot, Sir Hugh Willoughby, and several London merchants. In 1553, Chancellor sailed to the White Sea and then traveled overland to Moscow, where he visited Ivan's court. In this visit, Ivan opened the White Sea and the port of Arkhangelsk to the company, and allowed it to trade without paying standard customs fees for the duration of his reign. Ivan also engaged in lengthy correspondence with Queen Elizabeth I of England. While Elizabeth focused on trade, Ivan was more interested in forming a military alliance. At one point, he even proposed an alliance, and during conflicts with the boyars, he asked Elizabeth for a promise of asylum in England if his rule came under threat. Elizabeth agreed, but only if Ivan could support himself during his stay in England. In addition to his relations with England, Ivan communicated with leaders of the Orthodox Church abroad. When Patriarch Joachim of Alexandria wrote to him asking for financial help for the St. Catherine's Monastery in the Sinai Peninsula, which had suffered from attacks by the Turks, Ivan responded by sending a delegation in 1558. The delegation was led by Archdeacon Gennady, who unfortunately died in Constantinople before reaching Egypt. The mission was then taken over by a Smolensk merchant named Vasily Pozniakov. His delegation traveled to Alexandria, Cairo, and Sinai, delivering a fur coat and an icon from Ivan to the Patriarch, and documented his 2.5-year journey. Ivan was also the first ruler to significantly collaborate with the Free Cossacks. This relationship was managed through the Posalsky Prikaz, a diplomatic department in Moscow. The Russian government provided the Cossacks with money and weapons while allowing them certain freedoms. This cooperation aimed to form an alliance against the Tatars. The first recorded instance of this cooperation occurred in 1549 when Ivan ordered the Don Cossacks to launch an attack on Crimea. Conquest of Kazan and Astrakhan. During Ivan IV's childhood, the Kazan Khanate frequently raided northeastern Russia. In the 1530s, the Crimean Khan formed an alliance with Safajiri of Kazan, who was related to him. When Safajiri invaded Russia in December 1540, the Russians enlisted the help of the Qasim Tatars to counter his advances. After his attack was halted near Murom, Safajiri had to retreat back to Kazan. This setback weakened Safajiri's power in Kazan. A pro-Russian faction, led by a man named Shagali, gained enough support from the people to attempt several takeovers of the Kazan throne. In 1545, to support the pro-Russian group, Ivan organized an expedition to the river Volga. In 1551, Ivan sent an envoy to the Nogai horde, and they agreed to remain neutral during the upcoming conflict. At this time, the Ar-Begs and Udmurts also accepted Russian authority. That same year, a wooden fort called Svyazk was transported down the Volga River from Uglich to Kazan. This fort served as the Russian base for the important campaign against Kazan in 1552. On June 16, 1552, Ivan led a large Russian army toward Kazan. The siege of the Tatar capital began on August 30th. Under the command of Prince Alexander Gorbaty-Shuisky, the Russians utilized battering rams, a siege tower, and around 150 cannons. They also had skilled military engineers. The Russian forces blocked the city's water supply and breached its walls. Kazan fell on October 2nd, with its defenses destroyed and many of the inhabitants killed. Many Russian prisoners and slaves were freed during this operation. To celebrate his victory over Kazan, Ivan ordered the construction of several churches featuring Oriental designs. The most famous being St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow's Red Square. The capture of Kazan marked the beginning of a series of conflicts known as the Cheremis Wars. The Moscow government's efforts to establish control over the Middle Volga led to uprisings among local populations, which were suppressed with difficulty. By 1557, the First Cheremis War concluded, and the Bashkirs accepted Ivan's rule. In campaigns during 1554 and 1556, Russian forces conquered the Astrakhan Khanate at the mouth of the Volga River. In 1558, Ivan Vyrodkov constructed a new fortress in Astrakhan to replace the old Tatar capital. The annexation of the Tatar Khanates resulted in vast territorial gains for Russia, opening up large markets and allowing control over the entire length of the Volga River. This conquest of Muslim Khanates marked the beginning of Russia's transformation into an empire. After capturing Kazan, Ivan reportedly ordered the crescent moon, a symbol of Islam, to be placed beneath the Christian cross on the domes of Orthodox churches, reflecting the significant change in power dynamics in the region. Russo-Turkish War. In 1568, Grand Vizier Sokala Mehmed Pasha, who held real power in the Ottoman Empire under Sultan Selim, initiated the first encounter with what would become a future rival in the north. This encounter foreshadowed many challenges ahead. In Constantinople, plans were made to connect the Volga and Don rivers by building a canal. By the summer of 1569, a significant military force was assembled under Qasim Pasha, consisting of 1,500 Janissaries, 2,000 Sipahis, and a few thousand Azaps and Akinchis. Their mission was to lay siege to Astrakhan and begin work on the canal while an Ottoman fleet besieged the port city of Azov. In early 1570, ambassadors from Ivan IV negotiated a treaty in Constantinople, restoring friendly relations between the Tsar and the Sultan. The envoys were instructed to convey a message to the Sultan: "My Tsar is not an enemy of the Muslim faith. His servant Sain Bulat governs the Khanate of Kasimov, Prince Kybula in Yuriev, Ibak in Suroshsk, and the Nogai princes in Romanov." Livonian War. In 1558, Ivan IV initiated the Livonian War to gain access to the Baltic Sea and its crucial trade routes. This conflict proved to be unsuccessful and lasted for 24 years, drawing in several powers, including the Kingdom of Sweden, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and the Teutonic Knights of Livonia. The prolonged fighting devastated the economy and led to severe disruptions in the government due to Ivan's policy of Oprichnina. Meanwhile, the Union of Lublin united the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Poland, giving rise to an active leader named Stephen Bathory, who had the support of the Ottoman Empire, a traditional enemy of Russia. As a result, Ivan's territory was squeezed between two powerful forces. By 1579, after rejecting peace offers from his adversaries, Ivan found himself in a precarious situation. The ongoing war had caused many people to flee their homes, leading to a refugee crisis. The situation worsened due to a drought, which, combined with the war, brought about epidemics that caused significant loss of life. During the campaign seasons of 1579 to 81, Bathory launched a series of offensives against Muscovy to cut Livonia off from Russia. In his first offensive in 1579, he successfully recaptured Polotsk with an army of 22,000 men. In the second offensive in 1580, he took Veliki Luki, leading a larger force of 29,000. Finally, in 1581, he began the siege of Pskov with a massive army of 100,000 troops. Meanwhile, the city of Narva in Estonia was recaptured by Sweden in 1581. In contrast to Sweden and Poland, Frederick II of Denmark struggled to maintain his campaign against Muscovy. He reached an agreement with John III of Sweden in 1580 to transfer Danish titles of Livonia to John. Muscovy recognized Polish-Lithuanian control of Livonia in 1582. After the death of Magnus von Liffland, Frederick II's brother and a former ally of Ivan, Poland invaded his lands in the Duchy of Kurland. As a result, Frederick II decided to sell his rights to the inheritance. By 1585, Denmark had withdrawn from Livonia, retaining only the island of Saaremaa. Crimean raids. In the later years of Ivan IV's reign, the southern borders of Muscovy faced constant threats from the Crimean Tatars, who mainly aimed to capture slaves. Khan Devlet Igiri of Crimea often raided the Moscow region, causing significant distress. In 1571, a large army of 40,000 Crimean and Turkish soldiers launched a major raid on Moscow. The ongoing Livonian War had left Moscow with a small garrison of only 6,000 troops, which was unable to defend the city effectively. As a result, Devlet's forces easily attacked unprotected towns and villages around Moscow, leading to the devastating fire of Moscow in 1571. Historians estimate that the casualties from the fire ranged from 10,000 to 80,000 people. To secure peace with Devlet Giri, Ivan was forced to give up his claims on Astrakhan, which he intended to transfer to the Crimean Khanate. However, this proposed transfer was merely a diplomatic tactic and was never actually carried out. This defeat infuriated Ivan, who ordered preparations for future defenses. Between 1571 and 1572, new fortifications were built beyond the Oka River, which served as the border. In 1572, Devlet launched another raid on Moscow, this time with an even larger army, bolstered by Turkish janissaries who were armed with firearms and cannons. The Russian army, led by Prince Mikhail Vorotinsky, was smaller but had experienced soldiers and was supported by Streltsy, who had modern firearms and movable fortifications called Gulyagorids. Unlike the previous year, the Russian forces were now united, as they were no longer split into two groups, the Oprichnina and Zemsky, which had contributed to their earlier defeat. On July 27, Devlet's horde broke through the defensive lines along the Oka River and advanced towards Moscow. The Russian troops were unable to intercept the Tatars in time, but Prince Kvorostinin launched a bold attack from the rear against the Tatars. The Khan halted his advance just 30 kilometers from Moscow, then turned his entire army back against the Russians, who managed to take up defensive positions near the village of Melody. After several days of fierce fighting, on August 2, Mikhail Vorotinsky led a flanking attack on the Tatars, while Kvorostinin made a surprise sortie from the fortifications. The Russian forces achieved a complete victory, and the Tatars were forced to flee. The following year, after this significant battle, Ivan, who had stayed in distant Novgorod during the fighting, executed Mikhail Vorotinsky, the commander who had led the Russian victory. Conquest of Siberia. During Ivan IV's reign, Russia began a significant effort to explore and colonize Siberia. In 1555, after conquering Kazan, the Siberian Khan Yadgar and Khan Ismail of the Nogai horde swore loyalty to Ivan, hoping he would assist them against their enemies. However, Yadgar struggled to collect the full tribute he had promised to the Tsar, leading Ivan to ignore his ineffective vassal. In 1563, Khan Kukum overthrew and killed Yadgar, refusing to pay any tribute to Moscow. In 1558, Ivan granted the Stroganov merchant family permission to colonize the abundant region along the Kama River. By 1574, they received additional lands over the Ural Mountains along the Tura and Tobol rivers. The Stroganovs were also allowed to build forts along the Ob and Irtysh rivers to protect their interests. Around 1577, they hired Cossack leader Yermak Timofeyevich to defend their territories from attacks by the Siberian Khan Kukum. In 1580, Yermak began his campaign to conquer Siberia. With about 540 Cossacks, he advanced into territories that were under Kukum's control. Yermak worked to persuade various tribes to switch their loyalty to Russia, promising them better terms than those offered by Kukum. While some tribes agreed voluntarily, others were forced into submission. Yermak also established forts in the newly conquered areas. The campaign initially went well, with the Cossacks achieving victory against the Siberian army at the Battle of Chuvash Cape. However, Yermak needed more support, so he sent a message to Ivan the Terrible, claiming that the lands he had conquered were now part of Russia. This worried the Stroganovs, who had intended to keep Siberia for themselves. In response, Ivan agreed to send reinforcements in the form of his streltsy, or infantry. Unfortunately, the group sent to Siberia faced starvation and was unable to provide any help. Following this, the local people defeated the Cossacks, and Yermak was killed. The remaining Cossacks retreated from Siberia. It wasn't until 1586, 2 years after Ivan's death, that Russians finally established a foothold in Siberia by founding the city of Tyumen. Personal life. Tsar Ivan IV, also known as Ivan the Terrible, had at least 6 wives, though some sources suggest he might have had as many as 8. Of these, only 4 marriages were recognized by the church. Tragically, 3 of his wives were rumored to have been poisoned, possibly by his enemies or rival noble families who wanted their daughters to marry him. Ivan had a total of 9 children throughout his life. In 1580, his son, Ivan Ivanovich, married Yelena Sheremeteva, who came from a noble family. This marriage was significant because it was uncommon for the daughter of a boyar to marry into the royal family. On November 19, 1581, during Yelena's advanced pregnancy, Ivan became angry with her for what he considered inappropriate clothing. This led to a heated argument with his son, Ivan Ivanovich. Historians believe that in a fit of rage, Ivan struck his son on the head with his staff, resulting in the son's death. This tragic event caused Yelena to suffer a miscarriage shortly after the confrontation. The moment is famously captured in a painting by Ilya Repin titled Ivan the Terrible and His Son Ivan. Confirmed marriages and children. Anastasia Romanovna. Married, February 3, 1547. Died, August 7, 1560. Children. Tsarevna Anna Ivanovna, August 10, 1548 to July 20, 1550. Tsarevna Maria Ivanovna, March 17, 1551, died young. Tsarevich Dmitry Ivanovich, October 1552, June 26, 1553. Tsarevich Ivan Ivanovich, March 28, 1554 to November 19, 1581. Tsarevna Eudoxia Ivanovna, February 26, 1556, June 1558. Tsar Feofor I of Russia, May 31, 1557 to January 6, 1598. Maria Temryakovna. Married, August 21, 1561. Died, September 1, 1569. Children: Tsarevich Vasily Ivanovich, March 21, 1563 to May 3, 1563. Marfa Sobakina. Married, October 28, 1571. Died, November 13, 1571. Anna Koltovskaya. Married, April 29, 1572. Died, May 31, 1572. Sent to a monastery after marriage, later canonized as Saint Daria. Anna Vasilchikova. Married, between January 7 to 30, 1575, or September-October 1574. Sent to a monastery in August-September 1576. Maria Nagaya. Married, September 6, 1580. A widow. Tsarevich Dmitry Ivanovich. Born, October 19, 1582. Died, May 15, 1591. Later canonized as Saint Right-believing Demetrius of Uglich and Moscow, Tsarevich. These marriages and the tragic events surrounding his family reveal much about Ivan's personal life and the challenges he faced as a ruler. Unconfirmed marriages. There are two unconfirmed marriages related to Ivan IV. The first is Vasilisa Melentiva, who is said to have lived until 1579. But some historians dispute her existence. The second is Maria Dolgorukia, who is mentioned to have been married to Ivan in 1580, but her existence is also questioned. Additionally, historian Simon Sebag Montefiore reports that Ivan IV had an affair with a courtier named Fyodor Basmanov. This relationship became controversial when a magnate named Dmitry Oblensky Ovchinin mocked Basmanov, saying that while others served the Tsar in useful ways, Basmanov was involved in filthy sodomitical dealings. In response to this insult, Ivan became furious. He scalded Oblensky and then stabbed him to death, showing how intense and violent Ivan's reactions could be when defending his personal relationships. Arts. Ivan IV was not just a ruler, he was also a talented poet and composer. He created an Orthodox liturgical hymn called Stick Iron No. 1 in honor of St. Peter. This hymn, along with fragments of his letters, was later set to music by the Soviet composer Rodion Shchedrin. In 1988, the first Soviet-produced CD featured this recording, which was released to celebrate the millennium of Christianity in Russia. Epistles. Ivan IV was known for his writing, and D.S. Mirsky even described him as a pamphleteer of genius. His letters provide valuable insights into his character and reign, often serving as some of the only existing sources that shed light on his personality. However, Harvard professor Edward L. Keenan has suggested that these letters might be forgeries from the 17th century. This claim has not gained widespread acceptance among historians. Most scholars, including John Fennell and Ruslan Skrinnikov, continue to support the authenticity of the letters. Recent discoveries of 16th-century copies of these letters further strengthen the argument that they are genuine. Religion. Ivan IV, known as Ivan the Terrible, was a strong follower of Orthodox Christianity, but he had his own unique beliefs. He strongly believed in the divine right of kings, meaning he thought he had unlimited power granted by God. Some historians link his brutal actions, such as torturing people by drowning, roasting, or using boiling and freezing water, to the religious ideas of his time. These cruel acts were seen as a way to punish sinners, reflecting his belief that he was God's representative on earth, tasked with enforcing divine justice. Ivan may have drawn inspiration from the Archangel Michael, who is often associated with divine punishment. Ivan is known to have said, "I will not see the destruction of the Christian converts who are loyal to me, and to my last breath, I will fight for the Orthodox faith." Despite the Church's strict rules against marrying multiple times, Ivan had 7 wives. Even while his 7th wife was still alive, he was in talks to marry Mary Hastings, who was related to Queen Elizabeth of England. Although the Church prohibited polygamy, Ivan planned to put his wife away to pursue this new marriage. Ivan was known for interfering in church matters. He removed Metropolitan Philip from his position and ordered his execution, accusing him of treason. He also deposed Pimen, the Archbishop of Novgorod. During the massacre of Novgorod, many monks were tortured and killed. In the territories he conquered, such as the Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, Ivan showed a degree of tolerance towards Islam. This approach was mainly to avoid conflict with the Ottoman Sultan over control of these newly acquired regions. Ivan viewed these conquests as victories for Christianity. However, he also displayed anti-Semitic attitudes. After capturing the city of Polotsk, he ordered the drowning of all unconverted Jews, despite their important roles in the local economy. Death. Ivan IV, also known as Ivan the Terrible, passed away from a stroke while playing chess with Bogdan Belsky on March 28, 1584, Old Style, March 18. After his death, the throne of Russia went to his middle son, Fifer, who was not strong-minded. Fifer died without any children in 1598, which led to a period of instability known as the Time of Troubles. Appearance. The only true portrait of Ivan IV from his lifetime is found embossed on the binding of the first printed apostle from 1564. There is limited information about how Ivan looked because most of the existing portraits were created after his death and are influenced by the artist's imagination. In 1567, the ambassador Daniel Prinz von Buchow described Ivan as very tall, strong, and thick-set, with large, watchful eyes. He noted that Ivan had a reddish beard with hints of black, which was long and thick, and mentioned that most Russians, including Ivan, would shave their heads. According to Ivan Kateryov-Rostovsky, who was related to Michael I of Russia, Ivan had a harsh-looking face with a long and crooked nose. He was described as tall and athletic, having broad shoulders and a narrow waist. In 1963, scientists excavated and studied the graves of Ivan and his sons. Their analysis showed that earlier theories suggesting Ivan had syphilis, was poisoned by arsenic, or was strangled were incorrect. At the time of his death, Ivan measured 178 centimeters, about 5 feet 10 inches, tall and weighed between 85 and 90 kilograms, about 187 to 198 pounds. His body was asymmetrical, and he had many bone growths that were unusual for someone of his age. Researchers found high levels of mercury in his body, which they attributed to the ointments he used to treat his joint problems. While he was fit in his youth, he suffered from various bone diseases in his later years that made it difficult for him to move. Title. At the end of his reign, Ivan held an impressive title that included the Great Sovereign, Tsar, and Grand Prince Ivan Vasilyevich of all Russia. Vladimir, Moscow, Novgorod, Tsar of Kazan. Tsar of Astrakhan, Sovereign of Pskov. Grand Prince of Smolensk, Tver. Yugorsk, Perm, Vyatka, Bulgar. And others, Sovereign and Grand Prince of Novgorod of the Lower Land, Chernigov. Ryazan, Polotsk, Rostov, Yaroslavl, Belozero, Livonia, Eudoria. Abdoria, Kandya, and master of all the Siberian lands and northern countries. The title of Kazan was added in 1553, and Astrakhan was included in 1554. The specific titles of Tsar of Kazan and Tsar of Astrakhan first appeared in 1556. The phrase, Master of all the Siberian lands, was used for the first time in 1555, and from 1582. It was stated as, Master of all the Siberian lands and northern countries. During the Livonian War, Livonia was added to his title in 1558. And it remained part of his title even after Russia's defeat in the war in 1582. In English, Ivan's title of Tsar was often translated as Emperor from the first visit of Richard Chancellor to Moscow in 1553. For instance, he was referred to as, We, Greatest Ivan Vasilievich by the grace of God Emperor of all Russia and Great Duke. However, this title was not always translated consistently. For example, in 1582, it was translated as, the Great Lord, King and Great Duke John the son of Vasily of all Russia. Legacy. Ivan the Terrible made significant changes to how Russia was governed, shaping the way the country is organized politically today. One of his major contributions was the creation of the Oprichnina, a special territory that answered only to him. This system provided Ivan with personal protection while reducing the power and rights of the boyars, who were the noble class. As a result, the idea of absolute power for the Tsar became central to Russian governance. Ivan moved away from the traditional mesnichestvo system, which ranked nobles based on ancestry, and instead offered positions of power to loyal supporters among the lesser nobility. The administration of the empire was organized with a mix of local and central officials. This system was effective, lasting for many years and adapting to future changes. Although Ivan's military campaign against Poland did not succeed, it did enhance Russia's trade, political, and cultural connections with other European nations. This expansion set the stage for future leaders, like Peter the Great, to strengthen Russia's position as a significant European power. By the time Ivan died, Russia had extended its territory from the Caspian Sea in the southwest to western Siberia in the east. His conquests in the south also led to conflicts with the Ottoman Empire, which was expanding into the Balkans and the Black Sea region. However, Ivan's management of the economy was disastrous, both during his reign and afterward. He inherited a government burdened with debt, and in his efforts to fund his ambitious military campaigns, he imposed increasingly heavy taxes. The ongoing wars drained Russia's manpower and resources, pushing the nation towards the brink of collapse. After Ivan's death, the economy was so weakened that it contributed to the decline of his dynasty, leading to a chaotic period known as the Time of Troubles. After his death, opinions about Ivan's legacy varied widely. His extreme behavior and authoritarian rule established the idea of a Tsar who answers only to God, creating a system of governance that faced few challenges until the 19th century. The prominent historian N.M. Karamzin portrayed Ivan as a tormentor of his people, particularly after 1560. Although he acknowledged a mix of good and bad qualities in his character. Later, in 1922, historian Robert Whipper wrote a biography that portrayed Ivan as a ruler who cared for ordinary people, praising his agricultural reforms. In the 1920s, Soviet historian Mikhail Pokrovsky interpreted the Oprichnina's success as a result of their support for smaller landowners and townspeople in a long struggle against the large landowners, downplaying Ivan's role. However, in February 1941, poet Boris Pasternak remarked that there was a growing admiration for Ivan the Terrible and his brutal methods. Joseph Stalin, who favored strong leaders in Russian history, pushed historians to glorify figures like Ivan who had expanded and strengthened the country. In post-Soviet Russia, efforts were made to grant Ivan sainthood, but the Russian Orthodox Church opposed this idea. In 2016, the first statue of Ivan the Terrible was unveiled in Oryol, Russia. Although it was officially meant to celebrate the city's anniversary, many believed it also served as a political statement, recalling Stalin's era. The Russian Orthodox Church supported the statue's erection, leading to significant media coverage both domestically and internationally. Ivan has remained a notable figure in Russian and Bulgarian folklore. His character has appeared in classic Russian literature, including works such as Prince Serebreny, The Song of the Merchant Kalashnikov, and The Tsar's Bride. He has been featured in various operas and ballets, such as Prokofiev's Ivan the Terrible. The Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein created 2 films about Ivan's life, with a third planned but never completed. In popular culture, Ivan appears in the film Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian as one of the supporting characters. He also plays a major role in the 2009 Russian drama film Tsar and is a key character in the Soviet-era comedy Ivan Vasilievich. Back to the Future, which became one of the most successful films in the Soviet Union. Ivan features in the novel The Ringed Castle by Dorothy Dennett and is portrayed in the BBC Radio 4 play Ivan the Terrible, Absolute Power. Additionally, he is depicted in the mobile game Fate Grand Order as a monstrous version of himself, maintaining a lasting impact on Russian culture. As we conclude our exploration of Ivan the Terrible, it's clear that his legacy is both complex and multifaceted. From his efforts to centralize power and create a strong Russian state to his brutal methods and economic mismanagement, Ivan's reign set the stage for many of the challenges and developments that would shape Russia in the centuries to come. While some view him as a tyrant whose actions led to suffering and turmoil, others see him as a pivotal figure who forged a unified Russian identity. This duality has left an indelible mark on Russian history, influencing everything from governance to cultural expression. As we reflect on Ivan's life, it's evident that his story is not just about the past. It resonates with ongoing discussions about leadership, power, and responsibility in our world today. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more content. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.